The ice cracked beneath Hannah Zimmerman's boots with a sound like a gunshot, and in the half-second before the frozen surface of Silver Creek Lake gave way completely, she understood with perfect clarity that she was about to die alone in the Montana wilderness on Christmas Eve, 1883. The water hit her like 1,000 knives, so cold it didn't even feel wet at first, just impossibly, devastatingly solid. Hannah's lungs seized, her mouth opening in a scream that never came as the current dragged her under the ice shelf. Her heavy wool coat became an anchor, her skirts tangling around her legs as she thrashed in the darkness beneath the frozen surface. Above her, through the distorted ice, she could see the gray December sky growing dimmer as the current pulled her farther from the hole she'd fallen through. She had been so stupid, so desperately stupid. The stagecoach had broken an axle 15 miles back, and rather than wait 3 days in the cold with the driver and the other passengers for a replacement to arrive from Helena, she'd insisted on walking to the nearest settlement. The driver had warned her about the lake, told her to go around the long way, but Hannah had been certain the ice would hold. It was December in Montana territory, after all. Everything was frozen solid, except it wasn't. Her vision was starting to go dark at the edges when her flailing hand hit something, a submerged branch maybe, and she used it to pull herself toward what she hoped was the surface. Her lungs burned with the need to breathe, her movements growing sluggish as the cold seeped into her bones. This was it, she thought. This was how Hannah Zimmerman, schoolteacher from Boston, would meet her end, drowned in a frozen lake 1,000 miles from home, chasing a dream of starting fresh in a place where no one knew about her broken engagement or her family scandal. Then, impossibly, there was light above her and hands, strong hands grabbing her collar and hauling her up through the ice and into the air. "I've got you," a man's voice said, rough and urgent. "Don't fight me, just hold on." Hannah couldn't have fought if she'd wanted to. Her body wasn't responding anymore, wouldn't stop shaking, couldn't seem to remember how to make her limbs work properly. She was vaguely aware of being dragged across the ice, of the sound of it groaning beneath them, of the man cursing steadily under his breath as he pulled her toward the shore. Come on," he muttered. "Don't you dare die on me, lady, not on Christmas Eve. That'd be one hell of a lousy present." They reached solid ground, and the man didn't stop moving, didn't give her a chance to collapse into the snow. He hauled her to her feet, supporting most of her weight as he half carried, half dragged her through the trees. Hannah tried to speak, to thank him, to ask where he was taking her, but her teeth were chattering too violently to form words. "My camp's just up here," he said, as if she'd asked the question aloud. "Quarter mile, maybe less. You stay with me now, you hear? Keep those eyes open." Hannah hadn't realized her eyes were closing until he told her to keep them open. She forced them wider, trying to focus on her rescuer. He was tall, she could tell that much, with dark hair visible beneath a wide-brimmed hat, and a face shadowed by several days' worth of beard. His coat was canvas, worn and weathered, and there was a rope coiled over his shoulder that was still dripping water. He must have used it to pull her out. "What's your name?" he asked, his breath coming in white puffs as he navigated them through the snow-covered underbrush. Hannah," she managed through chattering teeth. "All right, Hannah, I'm Cole Zane. You're going to be fine, you understand me? I've got a fire going, got blankets, got everything we need. You're going to be just fine." He kept talking as they walked, a steady stream of reassurance that Hannah clung to as fiercely as she clung to consciousness. Her wet clothes were already starting to freeze, going stiff against her skin, and she couldn't feel her feet anymore. The shaking was getting worse, violent tremors that made her bones ache. Cole's camp appeared through the trees like a mirage. It was simple, just a canvas tent staked near a small clearing, but there was a fire burning in a ring of stones, and to Hannah, it looked like the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. Cole got her to the fire and immediately started stripping off her coat. "I need to get these wet clothes off you," he said, his tone matter-of-fact but urgent. "You keep shaking like this, you're going to go into shock. I'll turn my back, but you need to strip down and wrap yourself in these blankets. Can you do that?" Hannah nodded, though she wasn't at all certain she could manage it. Her fingers felt like blocks of ice, clumsy and useless. Cole piled several blankets next to her, then turned around, facing away from the fire and into the darkening woods. "I'm going to start heating some water," he said to the trees. "Get some warmth into you from the inside. You let me know when you're decent." It took Hannah 3 tries to undo the buttons on her dress, and when she finally managed it, the wet wool clung to her skin, reluctant to be removed. She peeled off layer after layer, her fingers fumbling with laces and ties, until she was down to her chemise and drawers. Those were soaked through as well, but she couldn't bring herself to remove them, not with a strange man 10 feet away. Instead, she wrapped herself in the blankets, piling them on until she was cocooned in rough wool and huddled as close to the fire as she dared. "All right," she said, her voice still shaking. Cole turned around, and if he noticed she was still wearing her undergarments, he didn't comment on it. He'd filled a small pot with water and was setting it on stones at the edge of the fire. From his saddlebag, he produced a tin cup and what looked like a flask. "Whiskey," he said, catching her looking. "For the water, not for drinking straight. Well, maybe a little for drinking straight. Medicinal purposes." Despite everything, despite the cold and the fear and the bone-deep exhaustion, Hannah felt her lips twitch in something that might have been a smile. Cole crouched down beside her, studying her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. His eyes were gray, she noticed, the color of the winter sky, and there was a small scar cutting through his left eyebrow. "Your lips are still blue," he said, "and you're shaking too hard. The blankets aren't enough." "I'll be fine," Hannah said, though she didn't believe it. The shaking was so violent now that she could barely hold the blankets closed. Cole shook his head. "No, you won't. Not like this. I've seen men die from cold like this, seen them go to sleep and never wake up." He hesitated, then said, "I need to warm you up faster. Body heat is the quickest way." "But I need your permission." Hannah stared at him, her exhausted mind taking a moment to understand what he was offering. He wanted to share his body heat with her, which meant he would need to be under the blankets with her, which meant they would be pressed against each other with very little clothing between them. Every lesson she'd ever learned about propriety, every rule drilled into her by her mother and her teachers and society itself, screamed that she should refuse. But Hannah had just nearly died in a frozen lake, and Cole Zane had risked his own life to save hers, and she was so cold she couldn't think straight. "All right," she whispered. Cole nodded once, then started removing his coat and boots. He was wearing a flannel shirt and denim pants underneath, both of which he kept on as he lifted the edge of the blankets and slid in behind her. His arms came around her, pulling her back against his chest, and Hannah gasped at the contact. He was so warm, impossibly warm, like a furnace at her back. "Easy," he murmured, his breath stirring her hair. "I know it's uncomfortable, but this will work faster than anything else. Just try to relax, relax." As if she could relax while being held by a strange man she'd met less than an hour ago. But as Cole's warmth began to seep into her frozen body, Hannah found that she couldn't quite maintain her tension. Her muscles were too exhausted, her body too desperate for heat. Almost against her will, she felt herself softening, leaning back into him. Cole kept up a steady stream of quiet talk as they sat there, his deep voice rumbling through his chest and into her back. He told her about his horse, a bay gelding named Rusty who was currently tethered on the other side of the camp. He told her about the ranch he was riding back to after delivering a herd of cattle to Helena. He told her it was actually lucky she'd fallen through the ice when she did, because he'd been planning to move on that morning but had decided to stay an extra day to rest Rusty. Fate, maybe, he said. Or just dumb luck. Either way, I'm glad I was here. Me too, Hannah managed, and meant it with every fiber of her being. The shaking began to subside gradually, so slowly she almost didn't notice it happening. The violent tremors smoothed into smaller shivers, then finally stilled altogether. Feeling started to return to her extremities, a painful prickling sensation that made her gasp. "That's good," Cole said. "Means the blood's flowing again. It's going to hurt for a bit, but that's normal." He kept holding her, even after the shaking stopped and Hannah let him. It felt too good, being warm and safe after coming so close to death. The fire crackled in front of them, and somewhere in the distance, she could hear Rusty huffing and stamping his feet. The sun was setting now, the gray sky fading to deeper charcoal, and a few snowflakes had started to drift down from the clouds. "The water should be hot enough now," Cole said eventually. He carefully extracted himself from the blankets, and Hannah immediately felt the loss of his warmth. He poured steaming water into the tin cup, added a generous splash from his flask, and handed it to her. "Drink this slowly. It'll warm you from the inside." Hannah wrapped her hands around the cup, savoring the heat against her palms, and took a careful sip. The whiskey burned going down, but it was a good burn, spreading warmth through her chest and stomach. She took another sip, then another, feeling more human with each swallow. Cole had moved to her pile of wet clothes and was examining them with a frown. "These are frozen solid," he said. "They're not going to be wearable for days, and that's only if we can get them properly dried, which we can't in this weather." "Oh." Hannah hadn't thought about that, hadn't thought about what came after being rescued. "I suppose I'll have to stay wrapped in blankets until we reach the nearest town." "Town's a good day's ride from here, maybe more in this snow," Cole said. He dug through his saddlebag again and pulled out what looked like a spare shirt and a pair of long underwear. "These will be too big for you, but they're dry and warm. Better than nothing." He turned his back again while Hannah struggled into the clothes. He was right. They were far too big, the shirt hanging to her knees and the long underwear needing to be rolled up several times at the waist and ankles. But they were blessedly dry and smelled like soap and wood smoke and something else. Something masculine that she realized must be Cole's own scent. "Decent," she said, and he turned back around. His eyes swept over her and something flickered in them, gone too quickly for her to identify. "Better," he said. "Now we need to get some real food in you. I've got beans and some salt pork. Nothing fancy, but it'll keep you going." As Cole set about preparing dinner, Hannah found herself watching him. He moved with an easy efficiency that spoke of years of practice, of countless nights making camp in wild places. His hands were weathered and scarred, the hands of a man who worked for his living, but they were gentle too, she remembered. Gentle when they'd pulled her from the water, gentle when they'd held her as she shook. "How did you see me?" she asked suddenly. "I mean, how did you know I'd fallen through the ice?" Cole glanced up from the pot of beans he was stirring. "Heard it," he said. Ice cracking sounds different from trees breaking or snow falling. Grew up in Montana territory, learned to recognize it. Then I heard splashing and I knew someone had gone through. He shook his head. "Ran faster than I've run in years. Thought I might be too late." "You almost were," Hannah said quietly. "I couldn't find the surface. The current was pulling me away from the hole." "That's how it gets most people," Cole said. "They panic, use up all their air trying to find their way out. You did good, staying calm enough to pull yourself toward the surface." Made it easier for me to spot you." Hannah didn't remember staying calm. She remembered blind terror and the certainty of death. But maybe some part of her, the stubborn part that had brought her all the way from Boston to Montana territory, had refused to simply give up. They ate dinner in companionable silence as full darkness fell and the snow picked up, fat flakes swirling down to hiss in the fire. The beans were simple but hot, and Hannah ate 2 helpings, surprising herself with her appetite. Cole watched her with approval, ladling more into her bowl without being asked. "So what's a lady like you doing walking across frozen lakes in Montana territory?" he asked when they'd both finished eating. "A lady like me?" Hannah raised an eyebrow. "Boston accent," Cole said. "Good manners, even when you're half frozen to death. And those were city clothes before they got destroyed. So yeah, a lady. Eastern lady, unless I miss my guess." Hannah wrapped her hands around her now empty bowl, considering how much to tell him. But this man had saved her life, had held her in his arms to keep her from dying of cold. She owed him honesty, at least. "I'm a schoolteacher," she said. "Or I was, back in Boston. I'm supposed to start a new position in Helena after the new year, teaching at a school for minors' children." "Long way from home," Cole observed. "That was rather the point." Hannah stared into the fire. "I needed to get away. From my family, from society, from expectations. From a man I was supposed to marry who decided he preferred my cousin instead." She hadn't meant to add that last part, but it slipped out anyway, bitter and raw even though it had been more than 6 months since the engagement had been broken. Cole was quiet for a moment, then said, "Well, he sounds like an idiot." The bluntness of it startled a laugh out of Hannah, short and sharp. "The general consensus was that I was the one who failed, actually. Not pretty enough, not charming enough, too outspoken and too interested in books. Like I said," Cole repeated. "Idiot." Something warm unfurled in Hannah's chest, something that had nothing to do with the fire or the whiskey. When was the last time someone had simply taken her side, without qualifications or conditions? "What about you?" she asked, eager to turn the conversation away from herself. "What's a cowboy doing camped alone in the wilderness on Christmas Eve? Ranch hand," Cole corrected with a slight smile. "Though I suppose cowboy works too. I was driving cattle to Helena with a crew, but the job finished up early. Rest of the boys decided to spend their pay in the city saloons, but I wanted to get home for Christmas. Or near enough to home anyway." "Where's home?" "Little ranch about 40 miles south of here. Nothing fancy, just a small operation. I've been foreman there for 3 years now, working for a man named Samuel Winters. Good man, fair employer. Got a wife and 3 kids." Cole poked at the fire with a stick, sending up a shower of sparks. "They'll be expecting me tomorrow, Christmas Day. Sam's wife, Margaret, she always makes this big dinner. Turkey and potatoes and pie made from preserves, the whole thing." There was something wistful in his voice, and Hannah realized he must be disappointed to be missing it. "You should go," she said. "Tomorrow, I mean." "I'll be fine here until I'm strong enough to make it to town on my own." Cole looked at her like she'd suggested he sprout wings and fly. "Are you out of your mind? I'm not leaving you alone in the wilderness in December. You'd be dead by morning. I don't want to ruin your Christmas." "You nearly dying in a frozen lake on Christmas Eve already made it memorable," Cole said dryly. "Besides, it's not like I can make it back to the ranch and back here in time to get you to Helena safely. We're both stuck here until you're strong enough to ride." "Ride?" Hannah blinked. "I don't know how to ride a horse." Cole rubbed his face. "Of course you don't. All right, well, that's something to figure out tomorrow. For now, you need to sleep. You've been through hell today and your body needs rest to recover." He was right, Hannah realized. Now that the adrenaline had worn off and she had food and warmth, Exhaustion was crashing over her in waves. Her eyelids felt like they weighed 100 pounds each. "The tent's not big," Cole said, gesturing to the canvas structure behind them, "but it'll keep the snow off. I've got bedrolls set up. You take them both, layer them for warmth. I'll sleep out here by the fire." "You can't sleep outside in this weather," Hannah protested. "You'll freeze." "I'll be fine. Done it plenty of times before." "Cole," Hannah met his eyes, "you saved my life today. The least I can do is not cause you to freeze to death through some misguided sense of propriety." "The tent is big enough for 2 bedrolls, isn't it?" "Barely," Cole admitted. "Then we'll both sleep in the tent. We'll be perfectly proper about it, I'm sure." Cole looked like he wanted to argue, but finally he nodded. "All right. But I'm keeping my gun within reach, just in case. Wildlife sometimes gets curious about camps." He banked the fire while Hannah crawled into the tent, which was indeed barely large enough for 2 people. Cole had set up bedrolls on either side, with maybe 6 inches of space between them. Hannah settled into the one on the left, wrapping herself in the blankets he'd piled there, and tried not to think about how intimate this all was. She was spending the night in a tent with a man she'd met only hours ago, wearing his clothes, about to sleep within arm's reach of him. Her mother would have fainted dead away. Cole ducked into the tent a few minutes later, bringing a gust of cold air and swirling snow with him. He settled into his own bedroll, and in the close confines of the tent, Hannah could hear every breath he took, every rustle of fabric as he arranged his blankets. "Thank you," she said into the darkness, "for saving me, for everything." "You're welcome," Cole said quietly. "Get some sleep, Hannah. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." But despite her exhaustion, sleep was elusive. Hannah lay awake, listening to the wind howl outside the tent, listening to Cole's breathing gradually even out as he drifted off. She kept thinking about how close she'd come to dying, about the terrible cold of the water and the darkness under the ice, about strong hands pulling her to safety and a deep voice telling her not to die. She must have fallen asleep eventually, because she woke with a start to find pale morning light filtering through the canvas and the sound of Cole moving around outside. Her body ached in a dozen places, muscles protesting yesterday's ordeal, but she was warm and alive, and the terror of the frozen lake felt like something from a distant nightmare. Hannah emerged from the tent to find Cole coaxing the fire back to life. He looked up as she approached, his eyes quickly scanning her as if checking for signs of illness or injury. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Sore," Hannah admitted, "but alive, better than I had any right to expect." "Good." Cole handed her a cup of coffee, which she accepted gratefully. "I've been thinking about our situation. We're about 20 miles from Helena, but that's rough country, especially this time of year. There's a closer option, though. Small mining settlement called Silver Creek, maybe 10 miles east. We could make it there in a few hours if we take it slow. And from there, you can catch a stage to Helena once the road's clear. Might be a few days, but at least you'd be somewhere with a roof and walls, maybe even a decent meal." It was a good plan, practical and sensible. But something in Hannah resisted the idea of reaching civilization quite so quickly. Out here, with Cole, everything felt simple, clear. The rules that governed her life back in Boston, the expectations and judgments, none of that existed in this wilderness camp. There was only survival, only the basic human needs of warmth and food and companionship. "All right," she said. "Silver Creek it is." Breaking camp took longer than Hannah expected. Cole packed everything with the same methodical efficiency he'd shown the night before, checking and double-checking that the fire was fully extinguished, that nothing was left behind. When he brought Rusty over, the horse eyed Hannah with what she could have sworn was suspicion. "He's not used to carrying 2 people," Cole explained, stroking the gelding's neck. "But he's strong and he's steady. We'll manage." Getting Hannah onto the horse proved to be an adventure in itself. She'd never been this close to a horse before, let alone tried to ride one. Cole had to basically lift her into the saddle, his hands firm on her waist, and even then she wobbled precariously until he swung up behind her, his arms coming around her to take the reins. "Just relax," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "Let Rusty do the work. I've got you." They set off at a walk, Cole guiding Rusty carefully through the snow-covered forest. Hannah tried to relax as instructed, but it was difficult with Cole pressed against her back, his chest solid and warm, his arms bracketing her on either side. She was hyper-aware of every point of contact between them, every adjustment he made in the saddle. "So tell me about this teaching position," Cole said after they'd been riding for maybe half an hour. "What made you want to teach minors' children?" Hannah welcomed the distraction. The job was advertised in a Boston newspaper. Good pay, room and board provided, and a chance to make a real difference. These children, they often don't get much education because their parents are too busy working the claims. But education is how they'll have a chance at a better life. "Noble goal," Cole said, and he didn't sound like he was mocking her. "What about you? Have you always been a ranch hand, more or less? Grew up on a farm in Missouri, but my parents died when I was 15. Fever took them both within a week of each other. After that, I bounced around, doing whatever work I could find. Ended up in Montana Territory about 8 years ago and realized this was where I wanted to stay." "Do you have any other family?" "A sister back in Missouri. She married a shopkeeper, has 4 kids now. We write sometimes, but it's been years since I've seen her." Cole shifted in the saddle. "You, 2 younger brothers and the cousin who stole my fiancée. We're not on speaking terms anymore, obviously. My parents sided with her, said I should be understanding that these things happen. So I decided to remove myself from the situation entirely. By coming to Montana Territory." "By coming to Montana Territory," Hannah confirmed. "Seemed far enough away." Cole made a sound that might have been agreement or amusement. They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the crunch of Rusty's hooves in the snow and the occasional call of a winter bird. The snow had stopped falling, and weak sunlight was trying to break through the clouds, giving everything a crystalline, ethereal quality. "Can I ask you something?" Hannah said eventually. "Sure. Yesterday when you were holding me, by the fire I mean, keeping me warm." She felt her face heat despite the cold air. "You must have done that before, for someone else I mean. You seemed very comfortable with it." Cole was quiet for a long moment. "Once," he said finally, "about 6 years ago, Cowboy I was working with fell through ice same as you. I pulled him out, did the same thing, held him until he stopped shaking. He lived. That's good. He was my best friend, name was Thomas. We'd been riding together for 2 years by then, been through every kind of trouble you could imagine." Cole's voice had gone flat, carefully neutral. 3 months after the ice incident, he got thrown from a horse and broke his neck. Died instantly. "I'm sorry," Hannah said softly. "It's the way of things out here. Life's fragile, especially in wild country. You learn not to take anything for granted. Learn to appreciate what you have while you have it." There was a philosophy in that, Hannah thought. A way of living that was foreign to everything she'd known in Boston, where people planned years in advance, where everything was about security and stability and maintaining appearances. Out here, there was only now, only this moment, and perhaps that made life both more terrifying and more precious. They stopped around midday to rest Rusty and eat some jerky and hardtack from Cole's supplies. Hannah's legs ached from the unaccustomed position of riding, and she walked in circles, trying to work out the stiffness while Cole checked Rusty's hooves and gave him some oats. "We're making good time," he said, squinting at the sun. "Should reach Silver Creek by late afternoon if this weather holds." But the weather, as Hannah was learning, was a fickle thing in Montana territory. By the time they mounted up again, the clouds had thickened and a sharp wind had picked up, bringing with it the promise of more snow. Cole urged Rusty to a faster pace, clearly wanting to reach the settlement before the storm hit in full. They were maybe 2 hours from Silver Creek when they heard the gunshots. Cole immediately reined Rusty to a halt, his whole body going tense. "Stay quiet," he breathed, his hand moving to the rifle strapped to his saddle. 3 more shots rang out, closer this time, followed by shouting. Cole cursed under his breath and guided Rusty off the trail into the cover of some pine trees. "What's happening?" Hannah whispered. "Don't know. Could be hunters, could be trouble. Either way, I'd rather not ride into the middle of it with you on this horse." They waited, hidden in the trees as the sounds grew louder. Now Hannah could make out individual voices, men shouting at each other, and the thunder of hoofbeats. Through the trees, she caught glimpses of riders, 3 or 4 of them, racing past on the trail they'd just left. One of the riders was slumped over his horse's neck, clearly injured. Cole watched until they'd passed, until the sound of hoofbeats had faded into the distance. "That was a posse," he said grimly. "Chasing someone, probably an outlaw. The injured man was wearing a badge. Shouldn't we help him? By the time we caught up, it'd be over one way or another. Besides, I'm not risking you in a gunfight. My job is to get you to safety, and that's what I'm going to do." They continued on, more cautiously now, Cole constantly scanning the trees and trail ahead. The tension didn't leave his shoulders until the first buildings of Silver Creek came into view. Rough, wooden structures huddled together in a narrow valley. Silver Creek was smaller than Hannah had imagined, barely more than a collection of cabins and a few larger buildings that probably served as a general store and saloon. But there was smoke rising from chimneys, and people moving around despite the late hour and the cold, and it represented civilization, safety. Cole guided Rusty down the main street, such as it was, and stopped in front of a building with a hand-painted sign that read "Rooms and Meals." He dismounted first, then reached up to help Hannah down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground, muscles cramping from hours in the saddle. "Easy," Cole said, steadying her. "You did good. Real good for your first time on a horse." A woman appeared in the doorway of the building, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps 50, with gray streaked hair and a weathered but kind face. "Help you folks. Need a room," Cole said. "Or 2 rooms if you have them, and a meal and a place to stable my horse." The woman's eyes moved from Cole to Hannah, taking in Hannah's oversized clothes and the way she was leaning on Cole for support. Her expression shifted to something knowing and slightly disapproving. "We have rooms," she said carefully. "That'll be $2 for the night each room. Meals are extra." "We'll take 2 rooms," Hannah said quickly, seeing the judgment in the woman's eyes and wanting to forestall it. "Though we'll only need them until the stage runs again," Cole added. "When's the next one to Helena?" "Not until the road's clear. Could be 3 days, could be a week. Depends on the snow." The woman stepped back, holding the door open. "Come on in, I'll get you settled." The rooms were small but clean, each containing a narrow bed, a washstand, and little else. Hannah's was at the end of a short hallway, Cole's right next to it. After the tent, even these sparse accommodations felt luxurious. "I'll see to Rusty and then get us some dinner," Cole said, lingering in the doorway of Hannah's room. "You should rest. You've had a hard couple of days." Hannah wanted to protest, to say she was fine, but exhaustion was pulling at her again. "All right. "Thank you, Cole, for everything." He nodded, his gray eyes holding hers for a moment longer than necessary. Then he was gone, his boots echoing down the hallway. Hannah sank onto the bed, which was thin but better than the ground, and let herself simply breathe for a few minutes. She was safe. She was warm. She was alive. 24 hours ago, she'd been drowning in a frozen lake, and now she was in a rented room in a mining settlement, waiting for a stage that would take her to her new life. But something had changed in those 24 hours, something more than just her proximity to death. She'd felt it on the horse, riding with Cole's arms around her. Felt it by the fire last night, wrapped in his spare clothes. Felt it in the way he looked at her, the way his voice softened when he said her name. She was developing feelings for Cole Zane. It was absurd, impossible, wildly inappropriate. They'd known each other for barely a day. He was a ranch hand and she was a schoolteacher from Boston, and they lived in completely different worlds. Once she got on that stage to Helena, she'd probably never see him again. The thought hurt more than it should have. There was a knock at her door, and Hannah opened it to find Cole carrying 2 plates of food. "Figured you'd rather eat in here than downstairs," he said. "That landlady was giving us some hard looks." They sat on the edge of Hannah's bed, the only piece of furniture in the room besides the washstand, and ate stew and cornbread that was surprisingly good. Cole had also procured 2 slices of pie, which he presented with an almost boyish pride. "It's not Margaret Winter's Christmas pie," he said. "But it's something. It's perfect," Hannah said, and meant it. They talked as they ate, the conversation flowing easily despite the strangeness of the situation. Cole told her about the ranch, about the cattle and horses, about the rhythm of life that followed the seasons. Hannah told him about Boston, about teaching Latin to bored society girls, about her dreams of doing something meaningful with her education. "You will," Cole said with certainty. "Those kids in Helena, they're lucky to be getting you. You don't know that, you barely know me. I know you walked across frozen Montana wilderness rather than sit around waiting. I know you kept your head when you fell through the ice, enough to save yourself until I could reach you. I know you're brave and stubborn and smart." He met her eyes. "That's enough to know you'll be a good teacher." Hannah's throat felt tight. "Thank you," she managed. Cole collected their empty plates and stood to leave. At the door he paused. "Hannah, I'm glad I was at that lake yesterday. Glad I heard the ice break. If I'd left a day earlier, if I'd been anywhere else." He shook his head. "Anyway, I'm glad." "So am I," Hannah said softly. She dreamed that night of drowning, of dark water and the terrible weight of her wet clothes dragging her down. But in the dream, there were hands reaching for her, pulling her up, and a voice saying her name over and over like a prayer. She woke with a gasp to find weak morning light seeping around the edges of the thin curtain and someone knocking on her door. "Hannah, you all right in there?" Cole's voice, concerned. Hannah threw off the blankets and opened the door. He was already dressed, his hair damp like he'd recently washed, and he had 2 cups of coffee in his hands. "Thought I heard you cry out," he said, handing her one of the cups. "Just a dream, about the lake." Hannah wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "I'm fine." Cole didn't look entirely convinced, but he didn't push. "I talked to some of the miners this morning. Storms moving in, going to be bad. No stages running for at least 4 or 5 days. "Oh." Hannah tried to figure out how she felt about that. Relief? Disappointment? Some complicated mixture of both. "So we're stuck here for a bit," Cole continued. "Not the worst place to be stranded. Town's got everything we need, and that landlady's stew is pretty decent." They fell into an easy routine over the next few days. Mornings, they'd have breakfast together in the boarding house's small dining room, ignoring the curious and sometimes judgmental looks from the other guests. Then Cole would go attend to Rusty and Hannah would read, having borrowed a battered copy of Shakespeare's sonnets from the landlady. Afternoons, they'd walk through the settlement, Cole pointing out various features and introducing her to some of the miners, who were universally polite if somewhat puzzled by her presence. Evenings were Hannah's favorite time. They'd have dinner, and then they'd sit in the boarding house's common room, which had a fireplace and a few worn chairs, and talk. They talked about everything and nothing, their conversations ranging from the practical to the philosophical. Cole told her about growing up on a farm, about learning to rope and ride, about the first time he'd seen the Montana mountains and known he'd found home. Hannah told him about life in Boston society, about the pressure to marry well and say the right things, about feeling like she was always playing a role that didn't quite fit. "You don't seem like you're playing a role now," Cole observed on the third evening. "That's because I'm not. Out here I can just be Hannah. Not Miss Zimmerman of the Boston Zimmermans, not the disappointing daughter or the jilted fiancé, just Hannah." "I like just Hannah," Cole said quietly. The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Hannah's heart was suddenly beating too fast, her skin feeling too warm despite the reasonable temperature of the room. "Cole," she started, but didn't know how to finish. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gray eyes intent on her face. "I know this is crazy. We've known each other less than a week. You're going to Helena to start a new life, and I've got responsibilities at the ranch. But Hannah, I can't stop thinking about you. Can't stop thinking about how it felt to hold you by that fire, to have you in my arms on Rusty, to sit here and talk with you like this." "I think about it too," Hannah admitted. "All of it. I keep telling myself it's gratitude, that I'm just grateful to you for saving my life. But it's more than that. I look forward to seeing you every morning. I find myself watching you when you're not looking, noticing things like the scar through your eyebrow or the way you smile when you're telling a funny story." Cole reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers closing around hers. The touch sent electricity up her arm. "What do we do about this?" he asked. "I don't know," Hannah said honestly. "I have to go to Helena. I have a job waiting, a commitment I made. I can't just abandon it." "I wouldn't ask you to. You've worked too hard to get here, and those kids need you." Cole rubbed his thumb across her knuckles, a gentle, mesmerizing motion. "But Helena's not that far from the ranch. 40 miles, maybe a little more. That's a day's ride. Are you saying you'd come visit me?" "I'm saying I'd like to keep seeing you if you'd like that too. Court you properly, the way you deserve. We could write letters, and I could visit when I have time off from the ranch, and you could maybe come out for a weekend sometime. We could see where this goes." It was reasonable, sensible even. But Hannah had spent her whole life being reasonable and sensible, following the rules, doing what was expected. Look where that had gotten her. Jilted, humiliated, running away to the frontier to escape the whispers and pitying looks. Maybe it was time to take a risk. "I'd like that," she said. "I'd like that very much." Cole's smile was like the sun coming out from behind clouds, bright and warming. He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, a gesture so old-fashioned and courtly that it made Hannah's breath catch. "Then we'll make it work," he said. "Whatever it takes." The storm broke the next morning, dumping another foot of snow on Silver Creek and making it clear that no one would be going anywhere for at least another few days. But Hannah found she didn't mind. She and Cole spent the day mostly indoors, playing cards and reading aloud to each other and talking. The landlady had stopped giving them disapproving looks, perhaps won over by their obviously separate rooms and impeccably proper behavior. On the fifth day, the sun came out and the snow stopped falling. The miners started digging out the main street, and word came that the stage would run the next day. "Tomorrow," Hannah said that evening, the word heavy with implication. Tomorrow, Cole agreed. They were sitting in the common room again, closer together than propriety strictly allowed. But this isn't goodbye. It's just until next time. When will that be? Cole thought for a moment. I need to get back to the ranch, spend a few weeks there making sure everything's running smoothly. Sam was counting on me being back before now, but maybe in 3 weeks, a month, I could ride up to Helena, see how you're settling in. I'd like that. Hannah hesitated, then said, Cole, what if this doesn't work? What if we get back to our regular lives and realize this was just something that happened because of unusual circumstances? You believe that? No, Hannah said honestly, but I'm scared to believe anything else. Cole took her hand again, that now familiar gesture that made her feel anchored, safe. I'm scared too, he admitted. Terrified, actually. I've been alone a long time, Hannah. Learned not to let myself care too much about people after Thomas died. But then you fell through that ice, and I pulled you out, and I held you while you shook with cold, and something in me just woke up. Like I'd been sleeping and didn't even know it. That's how I feel too. Like I've been going through the motions of living but not actually feeling much of anything. And then suddenly, I'm feeling everything all at once, and it's overwhelming. We'll figure it out, Cole said with that quiet certainty she was learning was characteristic of him. One day at a time, one visit at a time, we'll figure it out together. The stage arrived at mid-morning, a battered coach pulled by 6 horses, with a driver who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Cole helped Hannah aboard, then handed up her salvaged belongings, which amounted to not much more than what she'd been carrying when she fell through the ice. Most of her clothes were still too water-damaged to be useful. I'll send you some money to buy what you need in Helena, Cole said. You will not. I have my own money. Hannah, you lost everything because you fell in that lake. Let me help. You've already helped more than I can ever repay. The rest is my responsibility. They stared at each other for a moment, both stubborn, neither willing to back down. Finally, Cole smiled and shook his head. You're going to be a handful, aren't you? Almost certainly, Hannah agreed. The driver called that they needed to leave, that they had a schedule to keep. Cole squeezed Hannah's hand one last time. Write me, he said. As soon as you're settled, write to me at the Winters Ranch south of here. Anyone in the area will know how to get mail to me. I will. And you write back. I will. The stage lurched into motion, and Hannah watched through the window as Cole grew smaller in the distance, standing in the street with his hat in his hands and Rusty waiting patiently beside him. She watched until they turned a corner and he disappeared from view, and even then she kept looking back, as if she might catch one more glimpse of him. The ride to Helena took most of the day, bumping along snow-covered roads with 2 other passengers, a merchant and his wife who spent the journey arguing about whether to expand their store. Hannah barely heard them. She was too busy thinking about Cole, replaying every conversation they'd had, every moment they'd shared. Helena was bigger than Silver Creek, a real town with multiple streets and brick buildings, and the constant noise of mining operations on the hills above. The stage let her off in front of a hotel, and Hannah stood on the sidewalk for a moment, clutching her small bundle of possessions, feeling suddenly overwhelmed. She'd made it. She was here, in Montana territory, ready to start her new life. But all she could think about was what she'd left behind in Silver Creek. The school was on the eastern edge of town, a sturdy wooden building with a bell tower and windows that let in good light. The headmistress, Mrs. Patterson, was a brisk, efficient woman in her 60s who showed Hannah to her quarters, a small room attached to the school building with a bed, a desk, and a fireplace. Classes start in a week, Mrs. Patterson said. That gives you time to settle in and prepare your lessons. We have 40 students currently, ages 6 to 14, though attendance can be sporadic depending on their parents' work situations. Many of them have had very little formal education, so you'll need to assess each one individually to determine where to start. It was exactly the kind of challenge Hannah had been looking for, the kind of meaningful work that felt important. So, why did she feel so hollow? She threw herself into preparation, spending long hours planning lessons and organizing the schoolroom, and getting to know the other two teachers who worked with the younger students. She wrote long, detailed lesson plans. She arranged the books on the shelves by topic and difficulty level. She did everything she could to avoid thinking about gray eyes and a quiet voice and strong arms that had held her safe. On the third day, she finally sat down and wrote to Cole. The letter was difficult to compose. She wanted to sound happy and settled, didn't want him to know how much she was missing him. But she also wanted to be honest, to not hide behind false cheerfulness. In the end, she settled for describing the school and the town and the work waiting for her, and then, at the very end, she let herself write what she really wanted to say. "I think about you constantly," she wrote. About the fire and the tent, and the rides through the snow and the evenings in the common room. About everything you did for me and everything we talked about. I know it's only been a few days since I saw you, but it feels like much longer. I miss you. I miss you more than I thought it was possible to miss someone I've known such a short time. Please write back soon. She sent the letter the next day, giving it to the postal clerk with instructions to make sure it reached the Winters ranch. Then she waited. Classes started, and Hannah discovered she loved teaching even more than she'd expected. The children were eager and bright, hungry for knowledge even when they came to school tired from helping their parents. She taught them reading and writing and arithmetic, but also geography and history and science. She told them about the wider world and showed them that education could be their path to anything they wanted to become. But in the quiet moments, in the evenings when she was alone in her small room, she thought about Cole. Wondered what he was doing, whether he was thinking about her too, whether he'd received her letter yet. 2 weeks after she sent her letter, a reply arrived. Cole's handwriting was neat but clearly unpracticed, the letters carefully formed as if he'd taken his time with each word. "Dear Hannah," it began. "Your letter arrived yesterday, and I must have read it 5 times already. I'm glad the school is everything you hoped and that the children are responding well to your teaching. But I'm not going to lie and pretend the first part of your letter was what made me happiest. It was the end where you said you miss me, because I miss you too. Constantly. I catch myself turning to tell you something and remembering you're not here. I see something interesting and think about how you'd react to it. I went to the Winters for dinner finally, a week late, and Margaret's pie was as good as always, but all I could think about was eating that mediocre pie with you in Silver Creek. Sam asked me what was wrong, said I've been distracted since I got back. I told him about pulling you from the lake, about the days in Silver Creek. I didn't tell him everything, but I told him enough that he started smiling and said it sounds like I've finally found someone worth being distracted over. He's giving me 3 days off next month so I can ride up to visit you. I'll be there on the 15th if that works for you. I know it's just a visit, just a few days, but Hannah, I can't wait to see you again." Hannah pressed the letter to her chest, her eyes stinging with tears. He was coming. In 2 weeks, Cole would be here and she'd see him again. And maybe this impossible thing between them wasn't so impossible after all. She wrote back immediately, telling him the 15th would be perfect, that she'd arranged to have those days off from teaching. She told him about her students, about a particularly bright 8-year-old girl who reminded her of herself at that age, about the satisfaction of seeing understanding dawn in a child's eyes when they finally grasped a difficult concept. But mostly, she wrote, I just want to see you again. To talk to you and be near you and know that I didn't imagine everything that happened between us. I'm counting the days. The 2 weeks crawled by, each day feeling like 3. Hannah taught her classes and planned her lessons and tried not to obviously watch the clock. Her fellow teachers noticed her distraction and teased her gently about it, asking if she was expecting someone special. Hannah found she couldn't deny it. A friend, she said. Someone who helped me when I was in trouble. He's coming to visit. A friend, one of them repeated with a knowing smile. Well, I hope this friend knows what a lucky man he is. The 15th dawned cold and clear, and Hannah was up before sunrise, far too nervous to sleep. She changed her dress 3 times before settling on her best one, a deep blue wool that brought out the color of her eyes. She arranged her hair carefully, pinning it up, and then taking it down and starting over when it didn't look right. Cole arrived at mid-morning, riding into Helena on Rusty, and Hannah saw him from her window and nearly tripped over her own feet rushing to the door. She forced herself to slow down, to walk with dignity through the school and out the front door, but the moment she saw him dismounting, all pretense of dignity fled. Cole, she said, his name coming out somewhere between a laugh and a sob. He turned, and his face lit up in a smile that made her heart stutter. Hannah. They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other, and then Hannah was running and Cole was opening his arms and she was crashing into him, feeling those strong arms wrap around her and lift her right off her feet. I missed you, she said into his shoulder. God, I missed you so much. I know, I missed you too. Cole set her down but didn't let go, his hands on her waist, his face close to hers. You look beautiful. You look like you've been riding all night. I have been. Couldn't wait, wanted to get here as early as possible. His thumb brushed her cheek. Can I kiss you, Hannah? She'd been waiting for him to ask since the moment she saw him. Yes. Cole's lips met hers gently, almost tentatively, like he was afraid she might break. But Hannah had been drowning once and he'd pulled her to safety, and she wasn't fragile, wasn't breakable. She kissed him back with everything she'd been feeling, all the longing and missing and hope, and Cole made a soft sound in the back of his throat and pulled her closer. They broke apart only when someone cleared their throat loudly behind them. Hannah turned to find Mrs. Patterson standing in the school doorway, her expression carefully neutral. Miss Zimmerman, she said. Perhaps you'd like to introduce your friend. Hannah felt her face flame, but she kept her hand in Cole's as she said, Mrs. Patterson, this is Cole Zane. He's a rancher from south of here. Cole, this is Mrs. Patterson, the headmistress. Madam, Cole said, tipping his hat. Pleasure to meet you. Mrs. Patterson studied him for a long moment, then turned her attention to Hannah. You have the next 3 days off, as we discussed. I trust you'll use them wisely. It was a dismissal and a warning and a blessing all at once. Hannah nodded, grateful and embarrassed and excited all at the same time. Cole had arranged for a room at one of the hotels in town, and after settling Rusty at the livery stable, they spent the day walking through Helena. Cole pointed out various landmarks, and Hannah told him about her students, and they held hands like young people courting, which Hannah supposed they were, despite everything that had already happened between them. That evening they had dinner at the hotel restaurant, and Cole told her about his work on the ranch, about the cattle and the horses and the endless cycle of feeding and checking fences and preparing for spring. It's a good life, he said. Honest work, and I like Sam and Margaret. But it's lonely sometimes. I never really noticed how lonely until I met you. I know what you mean, Hannah said. I love teaching, love the work and the children, But at night, when I'm alone in my room, all I do is think about you and wish you were here." Cole reached across the table and took her hand. "What are we going to do about that?" "I don't know. Keep visiting, keep writing, wait and see where this takes us. Or," Cole said slowly, "we could make a more permanent arrangement." Hannah's heart stopped. "Cole, are you?" "I'm asking if you'd consider marrying me." The words came out in a rush, like he'd been holding them in and couldn't keep them contained any longer. "I know it's fast. I know we haven't known each other long. But Hannah, I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. You're brave and smart and kind, and you make me want to be better than I am. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep next to you every night. I want to build a life with you." Hannah felt tears streaming down her face, happy tears this time. "But my teaching position, the school. I would never ask you to give that up. You're too good at it and those kids need you. We'd figure it out. Maybe I could find work on one of the ranches closer to Helena, or maybe you could teach at a school closer to the Winters place. There are solutions if we want to find them. You'd really do that. Change your whole life around for me. Hannah, you are my life now. Everything else is just details." It was crazy, impulsive, exactly the kind of thing her mother would have fainted over. Hannah had known this man for less than 2 months. By all rights, she should say no, should insist they wait longer, get to know each other better, be sensible. But when had being sensible ever made her happy? "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." Cole stood up so fast, he nearly knocked over his chair. And then he was around the table, pulling her to her feet and kissing her right there in the hotel restaurant in front of everyone. Hannah kissed him back, not caring who saw, not caring about propriety or appearances or what anyone thought. They were married 3 days later by a circuit judge who happened to be passing through Helena. Mrs. Patterson and the other teachers served as witnesses, and if the headmistress thought the whole thing was rushing, she kept her opinions to herself. She did, however, pull Hannah aside before the ceremony. "Are you certain about this?" she asked. "You barely know this man." "I know him well enough," Hannah said. "He saved my life, and I think I might have saved his too in a different way. I know it's fast, but it also feels right. Like it's what I've been waiting for without even knowing it." Mrs. Patterson studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Well, you certainly seem happy, happier than you've been since you arrived, and heaven knows we could use a bit of romance and joy in this world. Just promise me you'll still teach. The children have grown quite attached to you already." "I promise," Hannah said, and meant it. The ceremony was simple, just the necessary words and the exchange of a ring Cole had bought from a jeweler in town, a simple gold band that fit perfectly. When the judge pronounced them married, Cole kissed her with a tenderness that made Hannah's throat tight, and she realized she was crying again. "Happy," Cole murmured against her lips. "Impossibly happy," Hannah whispered back. They spent their wedding night at the hotel, and Hannah discovered that being held by Cole for warmth was entirely different from being held by him as his wife. There was passion and tenderness and moments of awkwardness that made them both laugh. But through it all was the underlying certainty that they belonged together, that they'd found something rare and precious. "I can't believe you're mine," Cole said in the darkness, his hand tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "Can't believe I get to keep you." "I'm the one who can't believe it," Hannah said. "A month ago I was drowning in a frozen lake. Now I'm married to the man who pulled me out." "Saved you twice then. Once from the lake and once from a life you didn't really want." Hannah rolled over to face him. "No, I think we saved each other. You said you'd been lonely, that you'd been sleeping without even knowing it." "Well, I was sleepwalking through my life too, going through motions, doing what was expected. And then I fell through the ice and you pulled me out and suddenly everything changed. Suddenly, I was awake and alive and feeling things I'd never let myself feel before. Cole kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "Well, Mrs. Zane, what do you say we spend the rest of our lives being awake and alive together?" I say that sounds perfect. They worked out the details over the next few weeks. Cole talked to Sam Winters, who was understanding and supportive, helping Cole find a position at her ranch just outside Helena. The pay was slightly less, but the location meant Cole could come home to Hannah every night instead of just on his days off. Hannah continued teaching, her students delighted to hear their teacher had gotten married, the girls especially pressing her for details about the romantic rescue from the frozen lake. They found a small house to rent on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, but it had 2 bedrooms and a good kitchen, and a front porch where they could sit in the evenings. Hannah filled it with books and curtains and little touches that made it feel like home. Cole filled it with his quiet presence, with his steady devotion, with his arms that still held her close every night. Life settled into a rhythm that was both familiar and entirely new. Hannah taught during the day while Cole worked at the ranch. Evenings, they'd cook dinner together, talking about their days, learning each other's habits and preferences and quirks. Weekends, they'd ride out into the countryside, Cole teaching Hannah to handle a horse properly, both of them reveling in the wide Montana sky and the sense of possibility it represented. Winter gave way to spring, spring to summer. Hannah's teaching contract was renewed, and Cole's position at the ranch became permanent. They visited the Winters ranch a few times, and Margaret Winters took an immediate liking to Hannah, declaring that Cole had done well for himself, and insisting they come for Sunday dinner at least once a month. In the fall, Hannah realized she was pregnant. She told Cole one evening after dinner when they were sitting on their porch watching the sunset. "I'm going to have a baby," she said, simple and direct. Cole went very still beside her. "A baby," he repeated, like he wasn't sure he'd heard correctly. "Our baby. Due in the spring, the doctor thinks." Cole turned to her and there were tears in his eyes. "Hannah, He stopped, swallowed hard, tried again. "I never thought I'd have this. A wife, a family, a real home. I'd convinced myself I didn't need it, that I was fine alone. And now you're stuck with me and a baby," Hannah finished, smiling. "Now I have everything I never knew I wanted." Cole pulled her close, his hand coming to rest on her still flat stomach. "We're going to be parents." "Terrifying, isn't it?" "Absolutely terrifying," Cole agreed. "And absolutely wonderful." Hannah had to stop teaching when she got too far along, much to her students' disappointment. Mrs. Patterson assured her the position would be waiting for her when she was ready to return, and in the meantime, one of the other teachers took over her classes. Hannah spent the winter preparing for the baby, sewing tiny clothes and organizing their second bedroom into a nursery. The baby came in April, during a rare warm spell that had the snow melting and the first flowers pushing through the earth. It was a boy, healthy and loud, with Cole's gray eyes and Hannah's dark hair. They named him Thomas after Cole's friend who died, and Cole held his son for the first time with tears streaming down his face. "Hello, Thomas," he whispered. "Welcome to the world, little man. I'm your father, and I'm going to do my best by you, I promise." Hannah watched them, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. This, she thought. This was what she'd been searching for when she left Boston. Not just a new job or a fresh start, but a real life, a real family, real love. Thomas was a colicky baby who didn't sleep much and cried at unpredictable intervals, but neither Hannah nor Cole minded. They took turns walking him around the house at night, singing to him and telling him stories. Cole was surprisingly good with the baby, his big, rough hands gentle as he changed diapers and gave baths. When Thomas was 6 months old, Hannah went back to teaching part-time, leaving the baby with a neighbor woman during the mornings. It was hard being away from him, but she also loved being back in the classroom, using her mind and her skills, making a difference in young lives. The years passed, marked by milestones and small moments. Thomas's first steps, his first words. The way he toddled after Cole whenever his father came home from the ranch, shouting, "Papa! Papa!" Hannah getting pregnant again when Thomas was 2, giving birth to a daughter they named Hope. Another pregnancy 3 years after that. Twin boys they named Samuel and Jacob after Sam Winters and Cole's grandfather. Their little house became too small, so they bought land just outside town and built a bigger house with Cole's help and the assistance of some of his ranch hands. It had 4 bedrooms and a proper dining room and a big kitchen where Hannah could bake and cook and feed their growing family. Cole eventually took over as foreman of the ranch where he worked, the owner recognizing his skill and dedication. The position came with better pay and more responsibility, and Cole thrived in it. Hannah continued teaching, her reputation growing until she was considered one of the best teachers in the territory. Several of her students went on to attend university, something that filled her with fierce pride. They had hard times too, of course. There was the winter when Samuel got scarlet fever and they spent 3 terrified weeks nursing him through it. The year the ranch lost half its herd to disease, and Cole came home exhausted and discouraged night after night. The miscarriage Hannah suffered between Jacob and their youngest daughter, Rose, the grief of that loss taking months to fully process. But they weathered it all together, Cole and Hannah, the cowboy and the schoolteacher who'd found each other because of a frozen lake and a moment of terrible danger. They held each other through the hard times and celebrated together through the good times. And their love, which had started so suddenly and improbably, only grew deeper and stronger with each passing year. On their 20th anniversary, Cole took Hannah back to Silver Creek, leaving the children with Margaret Winters for the weekend. The mining settlement had grown into a proper town, but the boarding house was still there, looking much the same as it had 20 years earlier. They rode out to Silver Creek Lake, standing on the shore where Cole had pulled Hannah from the ice all those years ago. The lake was frozen again, just as it had been that Christmas Eve, and Hannah shivered remembering the terrible cold, the panic, the certainty of death. "I think about it sometimes," she said, holding Cole's hand, "about how close I came to never having any of this. If you hadn't been camped nearby, if you hadn't heard the ice break, if you'd been even a minute slower." "But I was there," Cole said. "I did hear it and I wasn't too slow." You can drive yourself crazy thinking about all the ways things might have gone differently. Better to be grateful for how they actually went. Hannah turned to him, this man who'd been her partner and lover and best friend for 2 decades. His hair was graying now at the temples, and there were lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun, and she'd never loved him more. "I am grateful," she said. "Every single day I'm grateful. For you, for our children, for this life we've built. It's not the life I imagined when I left Boston, but it's so much better than anything I could have imagined." Cole pulled her close, and they stood there on the shore of the frozen lake, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the sun set over the Montana mountains. Their breath plumed white in the cold air, and somewhere in the distance, an owl called out, but Hannah wasn't cold. She was warm, wrapped in Cole's embrace, warmed by the memory of that first fire and all the fires they'd shared since. "I love you," Cole said into her hair. "Then, now, always." "I love you too," Hannah whispered back. "Always." They had 15 more years together after that anniversary trip, 15 years of watching their children grow up and start families of their own. Thomas became a lawyer in Helena, marrying a doctor's daughter and giving them 3 grandchildren. Hope moved to Bozeman with her husband, a professor, and they had 2 children. Samuel took over Cole's position at the ranch when Cole finally retired, and Jacob became a schoolteacher like his mother, taking a position at a reservation school. Rose, their youngest, was still at home, just turned 18 and preparing to attend the new women's college in Missoula. Cole died on a warm summer evening when he was 63, sitting on the porch of the house they'd built together, watching the sunset with Hannah at his side. He'd had a good life, a full life, surrounded by family and love. His last words were, "I'd do it all again in a heartbeat," and Hannah held his hand as he slipped away, her tears falling but her heart grateful for every moment they'd shared. Hannah lived another 8 years without him. Years filled with her children and grandchildren, with her continued work at the school, with the community she'd built in Helena. But part of her was always missing, always reaching for Cole in the moments between sleep and waking, always turning to tell him something before remembering he was gone. When she died at 71, peacefully in her sleep, her children found a letter in her desk, sealed and addressed to no one. Inside, in her careful teacher's handwriting, was a single page. "To whoever reads this," it began, "I want you to know that I had a good life, a full life, a life rich with love and meaning and purpose. I fell through the ice on Christmas Eve in 1883, and a cowboy named Cole Zane pulled me from the frozen lake and warmed me by his fire and in his arms. That moment changed everything. It gave me not just my life back, but a life worth living. Love is worth the risk. That's what I learned. Love is worth the fear and the uncertainty and the possibility of loss, because those 28 years I had with Cole were worth everything that came after. The joy far outweighed the pain. The love far outweighed the loss. So take the risk. Say yes. Let yourself be saved and let yourself save someone else in return. Fall through the ice if you have to, because you never know who might be waiting on the shore to pull you out. With love and gratitude for a life well lived, Hannah Zimmerman Zane." They buried her next to Cole, in the small cemetery on the hill overlooking Helena, with a simple marker that read, "Together again." Their children and grandchildren stood at the graveside, remembering stories and sharing memories, talking about the love that had started with a rescue from a frozen lake and grown into something that shaped all their lives. And on cold winter evenings, when the lake froze over and snow fell soft on the Montana mountains, you could almost see them there, Hannah and Cole, sitting by a fire, wrapped in each other's arms, warm and safe and together for always.